Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics, and we do begin this morning with a conversation on the Great Salt Lake. For that, we bring in Speaker of the House Brad Wilson and Representative Timothy Hawks. Gentlemen, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Our pleasure to be here. Thanks, Glenn.
A very important topic, so let's get right into it. Speaker, let's start with you. When we take a look at the current state of the lake, lowest level ever recorded. You have to go back all the way to the 60s to even find it anywhere near where it is now. Taking a look at aerial shots or even up on the bench, it's just shocking to see what is happening out there. Your thoughts?
Well, it is shocking, and I think it's caught everyone's attention. And while we knew that the lake level was receding, it's been a real eye-opener for me to actually see that there are more consequences than just less water out there. There's actually real economic, real health, and also some serious concerns about quality of life for Utahns. And so those are the things that we intend to do some work on.
Okay. Representative Hawks, this is something you have been looking into. We'll get more specifically into what you're doing in a bit, but first just talk about your thoughts when you take a look at what's happening at the Great Salt Lake.
Well, I think this year's really been a wake-up call. The lake for so many people is out of sight, out of mind. It's just kind of something you fly over or drive by and don't really think about. But as it starts to hit these lake levels, just as the speaker was mentioning, then we start to see some impacts. And we've been fortunate for many years. There's been enough water in the lake to basically meet its what I call beneficial uses for industry and for the environment and everything else. But as these lake levels get lower and lower, then our concern starts to rise. And we're starting to approach what I would call critical thresholds that really just up the ante and really make it urgent for us to act now to do something.
Speaker, you kind of touched base on some of the consequences, but let's dig a little deeper into that. Specifically, you talked about economic, but let's talk health and just the climate even. You think about how important lake effect snow has been to us here in the state of Utah. That also in danger when we're taking a look at what's currently happening right now.
Yeah, maybe I'll just touch on those three elements real quickly. So from an economic standpoint, the lake generates about $1.5 billion worth of economic activity in the state of Utah, which is sizable. 6,000, 7,000 jobs are included in that. But here's what's also shocking. If we let the lake continue to recede more, it could cost the state upwards of $30 billion over the next 2 to 3 decades to mitigate the expense of that and to offset the lost economic activity that comes from that. And from a health standpoint, it's also a great concern. You know, if we see less snow in the mountains, and we also see these dust clouds form out across the shores of the Great Salt Lake, those dust clouds could include in them arsenic, lithium, and zirconium, which are all hazardous materials and chemicals for people to ingest into their bodies. Our recreation industry in the state is very dependent on lake effect snow. The estimate is that with these low lake levels, we're seeing 2 to 3 feet, maybe even 4 feet of less snow in our mountains, and our ski seasons are shorted by a week or two at least on each side. That's real economic activity for our ski resorts, but what I think we care about as Utahns is there's less days to ski.
Growing up here in Utah, it's hard to believe we're having this conversation at this time, but here we are. Representative Hawks, this is something, as I mentioned, you've been looking into. I want to bring up a case study out of California that you were looking at. What are you finding out of that as far as the negative impacts that we could be looking at?
That's a great question, Glenn. You're referring to Owens Lake, which is a small terminal lake in Northern California. It's about 1/20th the size of the Great Salt Lake, and water was taken from Owens to send to Los Angeles to fuel growth there, and it did exactly as promised. The problem was that what was left was really just a dry lake bed that eventually became the single largest source of particulate dust pollution in North America. And so, the local economy was damaged, and human health, the worst sort of air quality comes right out of that county. And so when we talk about some of these impacts that the speaker was mentioning, it's not just hypothetical. You can go to Owens Lake, or you can go to the Aral Sea, you can go to the Dead Sea, you can go to Lake Urmia in Iran, and you can see these impacts come out time and time again. And so it's not just hypothetical. These are real risks that we face if we don't act now. And if we don't act, I just say that the costs are catastrophic in terms of trying to come back You know, Owens Lake, they're looking at, they've already spent about $3 billion. They'll probably spend at least $5, and that's not to bring the lake back, but just to mitigate some of the dust effects.
Okay, let's talk about that. Taking action. Speaker, how are you and your colleagues in the legislature going to work with the governor and others to make sure we do this right and take the right steps?
Well, I think everyone understands the magnitude of the risk we have right now and the importance of working on this together. It's not a partisan issue. Republicans and Democrats alike have passion around this, and so we're going to be holding a summit on the Great Salt Lake the first part of January, where we're going to bring together policymakers and environmental experts and individuals that understand how our agriculture community is impacted by our water issues in the state, to start talking about what are some of the challenges we face, what are some of the solutions that we can anticipate, and also what are some policy items that we can put in place now and in the future to ensure we have really solved this problem in the Utah way, doing it with a mind to the future, but also getting things done as quickly and easily as we can.
Yeah, let's hit on that a little bit more, Speaker. I'm hearing urgency from both of you. So is this something that will get done soon, this legislative session?
Well, I think you're going to see the largest investment in water conservation, water projects, water preservation that we've ever had in the state's history. And the Great Salt Lake will be a large benefactor of that. But this is going to have to be a multi-year effort with a lot of commitment from different stakeholders across the state to ensure we prevent this problem from getting worse. And I actually think we have great hope and optimism that we can bring the lake levels back up to the level they were a decade or so ago and get the lake to be a healthier place.
Representative Hawks, there are a couple bills that will be working through the legislative session coming up. Talk to us about what specifically those would do to address this issue.
Sure. Well, I just want to acknowledge Speaker Wilson's leadership on this issue. It really starts with people recognizing that it's a problem and then taking action to do something about it. It was really his idea to host this forum on the Great Salt Lake and to educate policymakers about why this is so important. A couple of things that we're doing, the Speaker mentioned one that's the most important, which is unprecedented investment, really taking dollars to invest in protecting Great Salt Lake. We've never seen that magnitude, that order of investment coming in, and a lot of the other water infrastructure things that we're talking about, secondary metering and agriculture water optimization, they all sort of have indirect benefits on the Great Salt Lake. In terms of specific policies that we're looking at, I'm looking at some long-term funding options, basically shoring up some of the income that's already derived from the lake in terms of royalties paid to the state, and how can we bring that back to protect the lake and its future. And then Representative Joe Ferry has a bill that really deals with recognizing sort of the water rights associated with protecting the lake. So making the legal framework more amenable to protecting the lake and its future as well.
Okay, and that kind of goes back to the project out of California, which you were referring to. I just want to make one quick note, Speaker. That summit, as you mentioned, is more for policy and makers and stakeholders, but it's my understanding the general public can also watch virtually. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, January 5th. And
okay.
So they can go to the legislative website, le.utah.gov, and get more information about that.
All right, very important conversation, something we'll be watching. Thanks so much for being here and sharing what's going on at the State House with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.